Ukraine is not in good shape right now. And I saw a CNN report earlier today that was too long to feature here, but it was quite the sad scene. You know, they're walking around to all these villages, interviewing these older people who have lived there their whole lives. And, you know, these are just modest people living their lives. They don't want a war. They don't want to be dragged into anything. And the stories were just horrible. Like Ukrainian soldiers would come and like commandeer their apartment or their house and use it to fire from Russians upon. Like, it's just a horrible situation and it has to end. But the establishment doesn't want it to end. The neocons in both the Democrat and the Republican parties are hell-bent on getting this $60 billion through. For what? Well, let's hear for what. Marco Rubio is going to try to explain this, and you'll see what kind of bang-up job he does. Listen to this whirlwind of bullshit.
Here's what I do know. There is no way that the Russian Federation takes Ukraine, all of Ukraine, half of Ukraine. And that was Putin's goal from the beginning, was to carve it up into at least half the country.
No, it was an absolute total lie. The goals at the beginning were the peace terms they could have agreed to. I've said this a million times on this show, but I have to say it every time, because if they're going to lie about it every time, I have to tell the truth about it every time. Neutral Ukraine, recognition of the Crimea as Russian, and independence for those eastern separatist regions. That's it. Kiev was not part of the conversation. Half, most, all Ukraine, not part of the conversation. Absolute lie.
Including Kiev.
Well, he's saying that so he can, it's like Vietnam. Well, actually, we control the South. We won.
Victory. Right. They have to make it look like they've made some progress. Right. Like it's not a one-sided loss. Right. That this wasn't all in vain.
To at least half the country, including Kyiv, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. On the other side of it, the reality of it is that Ukraine is small compared to Russia in terms of size and its ability to bring scale, its ability to force conscript people.
Well, that's interesting, because I knew fuck all about Russia or Ukraine before February of 2022. You know, I'm a millennial. When I grew up, the wars were all in the Middle East. I didn't know shit from Shinola about Eastern Europe, but I knew that. I knew Russia was bigger than Ukraine, and that's why Ukraine couldn't win. So if ignorant moron like me could say that 2 years ago, maybe you guys could have said that 2 years ago and saved 500,000 lives. But no.
So neither this is, I'm just being honest, and in the past I have tried not to talk about this publicly because I thought it undermined the leverage that Ukraine had, but now it's the reality. Neither side is going to be able to achieve victory as defined in the most idealistic terms. So then the question becomes, if in fact there's going to be a negotiated settlement, who's going to have the leverage here? Is it going to be Putin or is it going to be Ukraine? And I want Ukraine to have the most amount of leverage possible when the time comes for those conversations to happen. They're not going to have leverage if Putin feels like he has the upper hand, that he has ways to gain and can force Ukraine into a situation where they become basically a satellite state, which is what he wants. He wants them to be like Belarus.
Okay, all right. Take a breath. Take a breath for a second. Have a sip of water. Okay, I gotta stop you there. Listen, whatever you think.
Nice reference for the hardcore politics.
Right, geeks. For the hardcore politics. Take a breath. All right, you're talking a little fast. Take a drink. Have a seat for a second. Whatever you think about Vladimir Putin, whether you like him or hate him, whatever your hatred is for Putin, I could tell you this, and you must acknowledge this, because this is objectively true. He is much, much smarter than the brain-dead idiots in Florida who voted for you, Marco Rubio. Much smarter. And if you think that $60 billion out the door from this country to Ukraine is going to give them some leverage in negotiations that they don't have now, then you are lying to yourself and whoever is watching you. You think Vladimir Putin is going to give you one more inch of territory than he would right now if you give them $60 billion? You just said yourself they're outgunned and they're outmanned. $60 billion delays things a few months. That's all it does. Right. That doesn't increase Ukraine's leverage whatsoever. And these poor people in eastern Ukraine, like I said, I watched this thing. You got these old men. I've been married to my wife. We've lived here 52 years. Just a simple guy with a garden and a house. He doesn't want this fucking hell brought on him. Like, look what you're subjecting people to. 500,000 people dead and injured already. Like, What's going on in Gaza is unthinkable. It's sadistic. It's evil. It's horrific, obviously. And, I probably shouldn't even go into like comparisons. But the reason I bring that up is because Gaza is 30,000 dead. Ukraine, you're talking about 500,000 dead and injured, right? Like I said, I don't mean to compare them, but I'm just saying Ukraine is much more sanitized in the media because we're not seeing videos of carnage in Ukraine the way we see in Gaza. But that's real. You got hundreds of thousands of people whose lives are ruined, a country whose future is dead end because of these fucking pieces of shit who fucking lie through their teeth for 2 years saying they have a chance to win. They do not have a chance to win. How are they more pro-Ukraine than a guy like me who's saying, I want the people of Ukraine to live peacefully? Anyway, sorry, you were saying something?
Yeah, for one thing, I hadn't really thought about this. They have social media. Why aren't we seeing that?
Well, why aren't they sending that out? I mean, this came out at the beginning of the war. Now, look, because so many young Ukrainian men have been drafted into the war, they don't count as civilian casualties because they were thrown on the front lines. But
I'm saying, combat. Why aren't they uploading these videos of carnage in Ukraine?
Yeah, because there's a whole lot of carnage.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. Why aren't we seeing that? Yep. Because we are seeing it from Gaza.
Yeah.
And this has been going on for 2 years now. You would think there'd be a lot of videos of carnage out of Ukraine. So I wonder why that is. We should research that.
Maybe because the media wants us to believe Ukraine is winning. They want us to believe they're winning. Yeah,
but that's not how's that going to stop the average civilian from uploading?
No, that's a good question.
Right? So where are these videos? But that, and to be clear, I'm not in any way questioning the carnage. I think there's carnage. I think it's strange that we're not seeing it. I'd like to know why that is. I rented my half my apartment to a Ukrainian guy. I'm about to reoccupy the apartment, and he says his entire town is gone. He's from one of those frontline eastern towns, and he speaks Russian, so I think he might be more on that side of things. It's going to be interesting when I go home. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. We're gonna have Well, look, I said this at the beginning of the war. Whatever the political orientation of the people in the eastern regions are in the Donbass, the ordinary person is just that, ordinary. Right.
Exactly.
And whatever your politics are, most people are just ordinary people, no matter where you live, no matter who you pray to, no matter what color you are, right? You just want to live your life.
Sure.
And the people in this...
Most people are not political.
Right. Most people do not want to fucking die for NATO or die against NATO. They just want to be left the fuck alone. And so to impose this horror on these people is just bone deep evil. And we've lost sight of just how evil this is because another horrific evil has understandably, obviously, stolen the limelight. And obviously I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to litigate which is more worthy of our focus. I'm saying they're both worthy of our focus because this is a horrible chapter in history. 2 horrible chapters in history ushered in by this senile ice cream man surrounded by the most vicious sociopaths on the planet.
That would be a fitting nickname for him. We should really replace Sleepy Joe with the ice cream.
The ice cream man. That's what I'm calling him. I'm calling him the ice cream man now.
That's perfect.
That's it. From now until November, he is the ice cream man.
The ice cream man.
Yeah. That's it.
Okay, so with what Rubio is saying, the only result of that, it's not going to be to have more leverage with Putin. As you say, he's not giving up 1 inch of the territory that has been so hard won. All it's going to do is get more Ukrainians killed.
Yes.
There was another article we were looking at, and we've talked about this a lot, both on our show and on Jimmy's show. They're out of people. It doesn't matter what ammunition you send them. When we covered this 2 months ago, the average age of the soldiers was 42. What's it going to be in 6 months? 50? Yeah. Dude, man, I mean, I'm 54. I'll tell you, you put me out there on those front lines, I would not last very long. You cannot have an entire army being subjected to that kind of constant physical, stress and torment. That's why they recruit 18-year-olds. That's why they recruit people at that age who can physically take that kind of abuse. You can't be putting people in their 40s and 50s out on the front lines for months on end like that.
Yeah.
So what the story that we were looking at, I sent this to you. The reason they fired the general they just fired was because he was telling them that their recruiting goals were unrealistic or they weren't going to be able to do it. So now they appointed a new general, and he can't solve it because you can't. What do you got? Cloning vats somewhere? It's not soluble. You don't have the fucking people. They're dead. How are you going to draft 1 million people? That's what they're talking about. Where are you going to get them from? This article got into also like Ukrainians who are within that age range who are like hiding out in apartments, who are not going down onto the street. We showed a video on Jimmy's show of a guy being grabbed literally
right
off the
sidewalk.
street.
Yeah.
They're afraid to go out on the streets. That's what they're down to. So why are you talking about giving them $60 million for what? To prolong that?
Right. And the just utter lie that that's going to increase their leverage.
Of course
Just
not.
Unbelievable.
Of course not.
Unbelievable. All right, let's let him finish.
He wants to keep territory, and then whatever's left over of Ukraine, he wants it to be a country that is forced to remain neutral and that in his orbit and sphere of influence. So I want Ukraine to have the most amount of leverage. And to do that, we have to help them. And I'm in favor of doing that, but we have to first take care of our country. So I believe that we should help Ukraine, but only after we help America through our border, in the same way as Democrats are saying, we won't help Israel unless you help Ukraine. And because they're holding Israel as leverage and hostage over Ukraine. So at the end of the day, that's what I hope we can achieve here. And I think it begins by the president doing what he should do anyways, which is to reverse the executive orders that have caused this migrant crisis at our border.
Wow, with messaging like that, I'm really surprised he didn't win the presidency in 2016. As our friend Nick Cruz would say, in shambles. In shambles. What an incoherence.
As our British friends would say, it's shambolic.
Shambolic. Here's a much more concise read of the situation from Time Magazine. Ukraine can't win the war. There you have it. A whole piece. We're not going to read this piece. But that pretty much tells you what you need to know there. We'll read a little bit.
What everyone with any sense was saying 2 years ago.
Yeah. The long-awaited counteroffensive last year failed. Russia has recaptured Avdiivka, its biggest war gain in 9 months. President Volodymyr Zelensky has been forced to quietly acknowledge the new military reality. The Biden administration's strategy is now to sustain Ukrainian defense until after the elections in the hope of wearing down Russian forces in a long war of attrition. Yeah. This strategy seems sensible enough, no it doesn't, but contains one crucially important implication and one potentially disastrous flaw which are not yet being seriously addressed in public debates in the western Ukraine. The implication of Ukraine standing indefinitely on the defensive, even if it does so successfully, is that the territories currently occupied by Russia are lost. Russia will never agree at the negotiating table to surrender land that it has managed to hold on the battlefield. They've secured the territorial gains that they wanted. Again, that accepts the Marco Rubio bullshit premise that they wanted all of Ukraine. They did not. And so, as you can see very simply here, they understand what's going on. You know who also might understand what's going on? Victoria Nuland, because she's quitting. Victoria Nuland, third highest ranking U.S. diplomat and critic of Russia's war in Ukraine, is retiring. Antony Blinken put out a statement about Victoria Nuland's retirement. Why don't we get this going here? Set the mood. What makes Toria, see, he says she's Toria. He's on that kind of basis with her, I guess. What makes Toria truly exceptional is the fierce passion she brings to fighting for what she believes in most: freedom, democracy, human rights, and America's enduring capacity to inspire.
We're talking about Victoria. Fuck the EU.
Fuck the EU, Nuland. Yeah, and promote those values around the world. These were the principles that drove Toria when we first met more than 30 years ago. They are the same principles she has brought to her work as Undersecretary and as Acting
We,
Deputy
yeah, we
Secretary
might
of
have
State.
spent a couple days blind drunk at a Holiday Inn, but after that, we decided we worked better as friends.
Exactly. A role she filled seamlessly for 7 months. Over the past 3 years, Toria has led this department on everything from addressing complex crises in the Sahel, Haiti, and the Middle East to broadening and strengthening America's alliances and partnerships across Europe and the Indo-Pacific. But it's Toria's leadership on Ukraine that diplomats and students of foreign policy will study for years to come. Is that right? Is that right? Is she the role model? Because the results in Ukraine wouldn't lend you to believe that she's worth studying all that closely. Her efforts have been indispensable to confronting Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, marshaling a global coalition to ensure his strategic failure. Again, what strategic failure? Ukraine, and helping Ukraine work toward the day when it will be able to stand strongly on its own feet, democratically, economically, and militarily. I don't know how they're going to do that when so many of the men who are childbearing age are gone. Like, I mean, it once again, just an unbelievable and tragic disaster for Ukraine, ushered in part, not fully, obviously, but in large part by Toria Nuland.
We usually reserve this cue for the recently deceased and horrific, but in her case, we'll make an exception.
Yeah, there you go. Yes.
Anyone's going to burn in hell, it's Victoria Nuland.
Yeah. So there you have it. There you have it. An admission of defeat. Yeah, it's just really incredible to see their case just fall apart in broad daylight there.
Please clap.